high in the rugged Wyoming mountains. Late summer of 1878, the air carried the sharp tang of pine and the hush of a world far removed from towns and rail lines. Elias Kane had long since traded the noise of the world for the quiet of these peaks. A former soldier of the Civil War, he'd slipped away from civilization after losing both his wife and child to the chaos of border raids. Out here in a weather-beaten cabin that was once a military signal post, he had only the wind, the granite ridges, and the soft crush of pine needles beneath his boots for company. That morning began like any other until he stepped outside and froze. Against the pale blue of the waking sky, a shape hung from the ridge beam of his roof. A woman. Her feet dangled her golden hair brushing the charred letters burned into his cabin door. Apache Lover. It read the words seared deep into the wood as if meant to last forever. Elias's stomach tightened. He moved closer, his boots grinding in the gravel. The smell of burnt timber still lingered acrid and accusing. When he reached her, he saw the faint rise and fall of her chest, shallow, uneven, but alive. Her face was streaked with dried blood and dust, her skin pale from more than the mountain air. He didn't think, only acted. Sliding his arms beneath hers, he lifted her down, feeling how fragile she was, light as a bird, but heavy with the weight of what had been done to her. As he shifted her over his shoulder, a crack split the morning air. Gunfire. Distant, but purposeful. Someone knew she wasn't dead. Someone wanted to finish what they'd started. Elias adjusted his hold and made for the hidden lean-to, near a cold, narrow stream half a mile downhill. The path was a tangle of loose rock and low branches that clawed at his coat, but he didn't slow. Every step was a gamble. Would he reach safety or meet the ones chasing her? The lean-to was nothing more than a rough shelter of logs and bark, but it was out of sight and away from open ground. He laid her on a bed of furs and blankets he'd saved for emergencies. Her hair spilled over the pelts, like a streak of sunlight caught in the shadows. For a long moment, he just knelt there, listening to her ragged breathing, the steady trickle of the stream and the oppressive silence of the forest. He couldn't think about who she was or why they wanted her dead. Not yet. The only fact that mattered was that she was alive, and he would not let her die here. Through the first day and deep into the night, fever gripped her. Elias cleaned her wounds with cool water, tore strips from his shirts to bind her arms, and sat beside her through the shivering fits. When she finally stirred, her lips parted, and a single name slipped out like a broken thread, Tama. The word carried pain and something deeper, a grief that belonged to more than one person. That night, she woke screaming, her hands clawing at her throat as though invisible hands still held her. "Get away. I'll die before you take me back," she gasped, eyes wild. Elias caught her wrists firm, but not hurting. "You're safe," he said evenly. "You're not there anymore." But she didn't hear him. In a flash, she lunged toward the fireplace, reaching for the splitting knife on the hearth. He pulled her back, his arms like a wall around her trembling frame. "Not like this," he murmured, his voice low but steady. "Not when you've come this far." Slowly, the fight drained from her, leaving only the shaky breath of someone who'd been running far too long. She turned in his grasp, her voice hoarse. "Who are you?" "Name's Elias Kane," he said. "This is my place, what's left of it. You found me." "I did. My name's Clara. Clara Whitford." The name struck him hard. Whitford. Elias remembered the orders scrawled with that name during the worst days of the border campaigns. Nathaniel Whitford, a cattle baron and self-proclaimed guardian of the frontier, had been one of the loudest voices calling for cleansing the land of native people, and anyone who dared mix with them. Clara's eyes dropped to the furs. Her voice tightened. I ran away years ago after my father struck me for the last time. I didn't just run, I followed someone. He saved me when I was bleeding in the creek behind our land. Said no one's born the enemy. His name was Tama. We lived in the canyons far from everything. I learned his language, wore his mother's beads, slept under the stars. Her voice broke. They came for us last winter. White men, some my father paid. They ambushed us. Tama died protecting me. I saw him fall. I couldn't even scream. She pushed up her sleeve to reveal faint bruises and burn scars. They called me a witch, an Apache lover. Said I shamed my blood. They dragged me from town to town. Then they left me hanging on your roof so no other girl would try to love someone like him. Elias stared at the fire, jaw tight. Her story echoed with his own ghosts, villages burned under orders, children's cries smothered by gunfire, his own wife and daughter caught in the madness of a purge they'd had no part in. "You can hate me," Clara whispered. "Everyone else does. I don't hate you," Elias said quietly. She studied his face, searching for a lie, but found none. "You think I betrayed my kind." "No," he said. "I think the ones who say that never knew what love looked like." For the first time since she'd spoken his name, Clara's shoulders sagged not in defeat, but in the fragile release of someone who'd been carrying her own defense for far too long. The wind shifted outside, and in that moment, the quiet between them felt like the start of something neither had expected. For 2 days, Clara drifted in and out of fever, her skin hot to the touch, her breath uneven. Elias tended to her without fuss, changing the damp cloth on her forehead, coaxing a few sips of water between her lips, cleaning the half-healed welts on her back with the gentleness of a man who understood pain too well. He didn't press her for more of her story. In his experience, words came when they were ready, not when they were pulled. Instead, he kept the fire steady, cooked simple broth, and occasionally stepped outside to scan the tree line. The mountains had their own kind of silence, but lately it felt like that quiet was watching him back. By the third morning, Clara could sit up on her own. She still flinched at sudden noises, her eyes darting to the door whenever the wind shook the frame. Elias noticed, but said nothing. Instead, he spent the afternoon hauling tools into the deeper part of the forest where the pines grew thicker. He returned that evening without explanation. The next day, she found out why. He was repairing an old hunter's hut he'd abandoned years ago, patching its roof with pine boughs, clearing away the brush, laying new bedding on a raised frame. She stood in the doorway, watching him work, her voice small. "You built this? For me?" He didn't look up. "Figured you might want space, somewhere no one knows but us. I never asked." "You didn't need to." Clara's throat tightened. It wasn't charity, he wasn't trying to own her rescue. It was dignity offered without strings. But dignity was fragile in these parts. Rumors traveled faster than the wind, and they'd already started to swirl. In a saloon, 2 towns away, Caleb Riker sat nursing a whiskey when word reached him. A veteran of the same militia Elias had once served under Riker had made a name out of violence, particularly against those who crossed racial lines. His hatred needed no excuse, only a target. A flash of blonde hair near the old station. A stranger moving through the woods. Tracks fresh in the dirt. That was all it took. Riker's smirk was pure venom. "We should have finished it the first time," he said, rising from his chair. Within hours, he had 6 riders, saddled no badges, just the kind of men who considered cruelty a form of justice. Up in the hills, a knock came at Elias's cabin. On the other side stood a local he vaguely knew, hat in hand, eyes downcast. "Don't want trouble, Kane," the man said quietly, "but there's a bounty. Quiet one. Coins and cattle for anyone who brings her head. Folks are saying you've been seen with her." He left before Elias could reply. Inside, Clara had heard every word. She was already shoving a few things into a worn satchel when Elias stepped back in. "I have to go," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "They'll kill you if they find me here." "They'll kill you if you leave," he countered. "You saved me once. I'm not asking you to do it twice." Elias's jaw clenched. He had spent years convincing himself that stepping aside, refusing to choose a side, was the only way to keep his soul clean. But that had cost him his family. He wouldn't make that mistake again. "I lost my wife and daughter because I stood still," he said, his voice low but charged. "I watched fire take everything and called it fate. I won't do that again. You're not baggage. You're not a burden. You're a person. And I'm done letting the world decide who's worth protecting." Her shoulders sank, but her eyes didn't waver. "They'll come." "I know," he said. That night, while the fire in the cabin burned low, Elias moved like a shadow through the woods. His hands, though long out of practice, remembered the work-setting alarm wires from old tins and shards of glass rigging trip branches along the ridge. They weren't meant to kill, just to buy time. By the time the first bruise of dawn touched the horizon, he returned to find Clara sitting by the hearth, fingers wrapped around a cooling mug of tea. "You could have run," she said quietly. "I could have. Why didn't you—" He studied her for a long moment before answering. "Because I've seen men fight to possess, to own, to chain. That's not why I'm here." "Then why?" He set a hand on the table between them, not touching hers but close enough for the space to speak for him. "I just want you to live." No one had ever said that to her before. Not her father. Not even Tama. People had wanted her obedience, her loyalty, her beauty. No one had wanted her simply alive. For a brief, aching second, she wasn't running anymore. She was seen. Beyond the ridges, faint and growing, came the sound of hoofbeats. The war wasn't done, but neither were they. The wind shifted after sundown, carrying with it the faint metallic taste Elias recognized from too many nights in hostile territory. Trouble was close. He rose from the cot without a word, pulling on his old coat. A check of the traps confirmed it. 3 had been tripped. No calls, no shouts, just the silent certainty of men moving with intent. Back in the cabin, Clara looked up from the fire, her eyes asking the question before her lips did. "They're here." Elias gave a single nod. "Stay inside. No lights, no sound." "I can help," she offered, already standing. "I need you alive, more than I need help," he said, and then he was gone, slipping into the darkness like a shadow folding into the trees. 3 shapes moved through the undergrowth ahead, hard men, their confidence plain in the way they carried themselves. One had a jagged scar down his cheek, another walked with a limp, and the third cradled a bottle of kerosene in one hand, a coiled rope in the other. Their whispers were low but carried. "Bet she's prettier when she begs. Better if she's half dead. Easier to string." Elias kept to the high ground, crouched among the roots of an old pine, his breath steady. He waited for the right moment, then dropped silently behind the last man. An elbow to the throat, a twist of the wrist, just enough to drop him unconscious without ending his life. The second man spun, blade flashing. Elias's fist found his jaw before the knife could rise, but the third caught sight of the movement. His revolver cleared leather in a blur. The shot split the night, echoing off the ridges. Back at the cabin, Clara froze. Her eyes darted to the shelves, then to the oil lantern and flint by the hearth. An idea, reckless, but all she had. She grabbed them both and stepped into the night. Out in the forest, Elias was already pressed hard, 2 against 1 now, their knives carving slashes through the air. He dodged, rolled, countered, but every movement cost him breath. Then came the light, not moonlight, but a sudden roaring glow from the underbrush. Flames climbed the low pines in an instant, licking from branch to branch. The air turned to heat, the fire's breath pushing against them like a living thing. The attackers cursed, coughing as smoke bit at their eyes. Elias used the moment, one swift kick to shatter a leg, a driving shoulder to send the last man sprawling. He didn't stay to finish it. He ran toward the fire, toward Clara. He found her at the base of a ridge, the lantern's glass shattered at her feet, a long branch burning at the tip like a torch in her hands. The hem of her dress was singed, her hair damp from sweat. She coughed, eyes watering, but her grip on the torch was steady. "You set the woods on fire," Elias said, his voice half disbelief, half something dangerously close to a smile. "Just a little," she rasped. "You could have died." "I know." He stared at her for a heartbeat longer, then took her by the arm and pulled her toward the ravine trail. They ran together, the smoke chasing them down into the canyon lungs, burning feet, sliding on loose rock. The mouth of an old cave yawned ahead, half hidden in shadow. Elias guided her inside where the air was cooler and the darkness felt thick but safe. He dropped to the ground first, then pulled her down beside him. For a while, the only sound was their ragged breathing and the distant pop of burning pine. Her hands trembled as he brushed a lock of hair from her face. The ends had curled into brittle ash where the fire had licked them. "Would you have died for me?" he asked suddenly, the question cutting through the quiet. Clara swallowed, her eyes locking on his. "No," she whispered. "I want to live for you." The cave seemed to shrink around them, the air heavy with the unspoken. The fire outside was their danger, but something else had caught flame here, a heat neither could run from. When dawn broke, the forest beyond, the ridges felt different, quieter but not empty. Somewhere in Bristlewater, Caleb Riker was already planning his next move. He wasn't the kind of man to let unfinished business lie. Elias knew it. Clara knew it, which meant they had only one real choice: stop running and face him. By the next evening, Elias and Clara were headed down slope toward Bristlewater. The town was a day's ride away, and every mile felt like walking a tightrope. Elias kept his hat brim low, scanning every rider who passed. Clara sat beside him in the borrowed wagon hood, drawn forward, eyes fixed on the road, but mind elsewhere. "Did you hear his name?" she asked finally. "Yes," Elias said. "Then it's him." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small blackened scrap of leather. Elias recognized it instantly, the piece he'd torn from his cabin door the morning he found her hanging. In the daylight, the word Apache lover was still legible, but now she traced the letters with her fingertips, studying their shape. "This wasn't done with a stamp," she murmured. "It's handwriting burned in by hand. See the way the P dips below the line, the curl of the R." "You know it," Elias said. "I've seen it before. Caleb Riker used to write letters to my father. Threats, warnings, they shared the same hatred. My father used gold, Riker used fire. And this is his hand." Elias held the scrap for a moment, the charred edges staining his fingers. "Then he's not just hunting us," he said. "He's hunting memory. Wants anyone who ever loved to cross the lines to vanish." "Then we have to remind them," Clara said. Her voice wasn't shaking anymore. That night, they went first to the church. The records room smelled of dust and lamp oil. Clara searched the donation files until she found it a draft letter her father had burned after reading. It was addressed to him from Riker, half charred, but the words still clear enough a slur, a threat against her life, and the same twisted handwriting as the leather scrap. Elias wrapped the letter in oilcloth, then led her to the deputy's office. The young lawman was wary, but he listened as Elias laid the leather scrap and the letter on his desk. Elias told the story without flinching, without asking for trust, just laying the truth bare. "We're not here to hang him," Elias said. "We're here to show you the rope." The deputy's jaw tightened. "Riker's due in Friday. Been gathering men. But if this is true, folks deserve to know who they're letting into their homes." Clara stepped forward. "I don't need them to like me. I just need them to see me as a person, not a warning." 2 days later, Bristlewater's main square was packed. People stood in clusters near the courthouse steps, curiosity pulling them in despite the tension in the air. Mayor Hall sat at a table with a small panel of elders and deputies, his face lined with unease. Elias stepped forward, the sun hot on his back. "I have here," he said, holding up the oilcloth bundle, a letter written by Caleb Riker to Nathaniel Whitford, accusing his own daughter of shame and calling for the death of the man she loved. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He set the letter down, then held up the burned leather scrap. "And this found nailed to the cabin where she was left to die. Same script, same hand." From the side of the crowd, Riker's voice cut in sharp and mocking. "This is a circus. War stories from a hermit and a woman who betrayed her own kind. You want to let them raise your children next." A few heads nodded, but more faces looked uncertain. Then a voice spoke from the shade. "I was there." An old man, bent and white-bearded, leaned on a cane as he stepped forward. Field surgeon under the militia the night of the Dustwater raid. Riker gave the order, no quarter, no captives. Wanted the land washed clean. Riker scoffed. "Lies from a dying drunk." The old man met his gaze. "You buried your guilt in whiskey. I buried mine in silence. But only one of us still dreams of fire." A hush fell. Then Clara moved to the front, her hands steady as she untied the back of her blouse. Gasps swept the square. The scars on her back were long twisted ropes of flesh, some still red at the edges. "These weren't left by Apache blades," she said, turning so all could hear. "They weren't made in the woods by tribal hands. They were given to me by white hands, by men who said they were saving me from sin. Tama didn't chain me. He taught me to hunt hawks and plant seeds. He died protecting me. Riker didn't hang me to punish love. He did it to silence it. No one clapped, no one shouted, but no one looked at Riker the same way again. The truth had been spoken, carved into the air as deeply as the scars on her back. By day's end, the town voted. Riker would face judgment not with bullets in the night, but with the law he'd long ignored. Elias and Clara didn't wait to see the gallows built. By the time the sun set, they were riding back toward the mountains. The climb back into the high country was slow, the wagon wheels grinding over loose rock and ruts carved by spring floods. Neither Elias nor Clara spoke much. Bristlewater was behind them, but the air still carried the echo of that day, the hush after Clara's voice had cut through the square, the way the crowd's eyes had shifted, seeing her as a person for the first time. It took them 3 days to reach the ridge where Elias's old hunting cabin stood. The place was just as he remembered, weathered walls leaning slightly, the door hanging by one hinge, windows cracked from years of wind and frost. He set to work, without hurry, repairing what time had chewed away. Clara gathered pine needles for bedding, stripped bark for pain medicine, and cleared weeds from the small patch of ground beside the cabin. By the end of the first week, they'd dug a shallow well and planted beans and squash. Elias built an extra room with rough-hewn logs, his hands remembering the rhythm of work that had nothing to do with war. Clara mixed blue ash from wildflowers into paint and brushed it across the new door. "For peace," she said softly. Word traveled even up here. A boy came first, barely 20, turned away by his parents for marrying a Cheyenne girl. Then a woman with a scar running from her temple to her jaw, carrying only the clothes on her back. A half-starved horse limped into their clearing one evening, a bullet grazed along its flank. Each time Elias and Clara offered the same thing: food, water, shelter. No questions unless the guests wanted to answer. The cabin became more than a refuge for the two of them. It became a place where people who had been told they didn't belong could stop running. And for Elias, it was the first time in years he felt something loosening in his chest, like a knot finally coming undone. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, throwing the mountains into a red-gold haze, Elias walked up the path to where Clara stood by the split-rail fence. Dust clung to his boots, his hat hung in one hand. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't kneel. "You don't need to say yes," he murmured. "There's no ring, no preacher, no toast. I just need to know you'll still be here when the sun drops behind that tree, and the next night, and the next." Clara turned toward him slowly, her hands resting on his shirt front. "Tama was my first storm," she said, her voice trembling. "He broke the locks on my cage. He taught me fire. But you," she reached up, touching his face, "you taught me stillness. That love doesn't have to be lightning to be real. It can be the sound of wood creaking under moonlight, the smell of smoke on flannel." Elias didn't answer. He simply closed his eyes and rested his forehead against hers. From that night on, there were no vows spoken, no papers signed, no witnesses to mark the moment. But the wind through the pines seemed quieter, and the fire inside the cabin never burned out. Months later, a letter appeared in the Bristlewater schoolhouse, tucked between the pages of a donated book. It had no signature, but the handwriting was steady, graceful. "I was once loved by a man who held my heart like a blade, bright, fierce, and sharp. Now I live with a man who holds it like soil, soft, steady, and strong enough to plant something in. The first taught me how to fight. The second taught me how to stay. Love isn't proven by how far you run or how loud you shout, but by how long you remain when the fire goes out and the nights are quiet. He is not my captor. He is not my savior. He is simply the one who stayed. And that is enough." In a land shaped by wind and fire, two lives once broken by war and loss found not just survival, but peace. Not just memory, but a reason to remain. Elias and Clara's names were never written in history books, but their story still lingers in the cabin on the ridge and the blue-painted door and the spring flowers that bloom there every year. Love doesn't always arrive in thunderclaps or sweeping gestures. Sometimes it's the quiet presence that stays through long winters, the hand that steadies without binding. In a world quick to decide who belongs and who doesn't, the choice to stand by someone to truly stay is the rarest courage. If this story stirred something in you, share your thoughts below. Tell us about the quiet acts of loyalty that shaped your own life, and subscribe for more tales of love that outlast fear. Out here, every choice to stay leaves a trail.